Welcome, advocates, to another episode of the Leading Equity Podcast, a podcast that focuses on supporting educators with the tools and resources necessary to ensure equity at their schools. Today's special guest is Marcela Andres. Without further ado, Marcela, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Dr. Eakins. And thank you, everyone, for listening today. I am honored to be in great company.
Pleasure is all mine. You and I have been connecting, bonding over Houston, Texas, and talking about equity work and just want to be a podcaster one day. All these different things we've been talking about, but the pleasure is really mine. I'm glad we're connecting here. Before we get into today's topic, I'd love for you to share a little bit about yourself and what you currently do.
Yes, absolutely. So I am the proud president of Designed Engagement. It is a Latina-owned educational consulting firm on a mission to reimagine how families, educators, and community members partner to support the hopes and dreams of children. And I'm also the author of the book called Purposeful Educator Connection, and recently had the opportunity to do a TEDx on the topic of how relationships can redefine education.
Nice. Well, good for you. One of these days, it's on my bookshelf of things
Hey.
to do.
Yes, let's go.
Sorry, folks. We were just talking about to-do list versus bookshelf.
Mhm.
And so TEDx or TED Talk is on my bookshelf nowadays. So one of these days we'll get to it. Let's talk about education these days. Like diversity, equity, inclusion is always under fire. We're defining book bannings, and we're talking about curriculum instruction, critical race theory, all these different things that are out there. And if I'm a school leader and I'm about this life, more than likely I'm getting pushback. And if it's not from a parent, it's from a teacher or a student, somebody, right? Yep. And I want to start with some strategies that you might have in regards to those who are in school leadership roles that are looking to like deal with some of the pushback that they may be facing when it comes to these initiatives that are equity related.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I love how you just said, if you're about this life. Sometimes I feel like there's words and language that we can use to like really signal to people like, bring your full authentic self. And I'm about this life. So it's always keep it real. I think the number one thing for educators and principals and educational leaders serving our country today, that you have a purpose, and centering on that purpose is what makes you be about this life. Like, I don't think I've come across any educational leader that says, I want to do the work for non-serving humanity reasons. Yeah.
Okay.
So the practical strategies. So I just want to say that, but
I was like, what just happened?
What just happened, Marcela? What just happened? Because I have a million thoughts come into my head. I'm exploring this term that they said, like being neurodivergent. I'm like, maybe that is what I am. I'm gonna celebrate that. When it comes down to about practical strategies, like center yourself on purpose and really know like why you're doing this work. I mentioned to you, like, I firmly believe and am on a mission to reimagine how families, educators, and community members partner. And one of the key strategies for us to do this DEI work, even if we're not calling it DEI work, is to build trust and partnerships with our communities and ultimately just advance equity through our practice, the actual practice of doing the work. You've heard the headlines, you've read the headlines just like myself, like the language is under attack, but the practice, right, is something that no one can take away from us. And I think the practice is treating one another with humanity, dignity, and respect.
How does that look? Because we could talk about like it from a communication standpoint. So we talk about practice and equity and things like that. So I know like a lot of, it's just now, I would say, I've been working with a lot of schools and they realizing, look, Spanish is not the only language outside of English that a lot of our students speak. I was just working at a school where there's a lot of students that speak Swahili, for example. And I'm like, are you able to translate some of your communication? Because it's great that they have iPads in the classroom. And so we're able to use Google Translate in order to communicate with the students. But what about the parents, guardians, community members that might speak other languages? So that's one thing that comes to mind when about strategies and practice, as opposed to just saying things. What are your thoughts in that area?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Beyond like the actual focusing on relationships and partnerships, which it just comes down to like just being really mindful of the everyday interactions that you have with students and families is really important. And there's a difference between like doing things from a policy standpoint than from a practice standpoint. So like I want to ground in an example because I've worked in schools as a teacher, as well as an administrator, and then as an educational consultant, like there's a lot of family engagement policies, but the practice is very different. And so a policy can say, let's ensure that we have X number of events so that we can have family engagement at our school. A practice of family engagement is actually intentionally designing the systems so that your families can engage as partners in their child's learning. And there's a technical aspect of that, but there's also a mindset shift in that work of ensuring that you are calling families 2 weeks ahead, which gives that space for dignity and respect. You are making it accessible to whatever language that they speak. You're also creating different modalities for them to engage. Not all families can physically come to the school, and especially not currently, be it because of immigration reasons or be it because they're high profile working people that just can't physically come to the school. Like, you got to create spaces for everyone. And so when you think about that example from policy to practice, that's a clear example for me of a good practice around being inclusive to all families.
I think a lot of schools mix up parent involvement versus engagement. And this is something I've been talking about on some of my LinkedIn posts is parent involvement is doing something to parents versus the engagement is doing something with. So like if we're telling our parents, make sure you sign up for the bake sale or make sure that you turn in permission slips and all these different things. That's the involvement side of things. And then like, if we're not getting those permission slips, if we're not seeing parents at the bake sales or not seeing them at the festivals or whatever things that we're doing at our schools, and we start saying, oh, well, that parent's not involved. But we're not necessarily always partnering. I heard you mention that, partnering up with our families. And I think that's really important. Sometimes that gets missed, gets lost. We're not asking those questions like, how come you weren't able to make it to school, or what would be the best time for you to make it to school? And those conversations and questions aren't always happening.
Yeah, no, 100%. And, when I think about family engagement, I think about democracy, I think about DEI, right? Like, I think about these like big systems, these big conversations that we're having. Family engagement is a mirror to our democracy. And I mean, there's no surprise like who is and who is not showing up to our polls. And it's very similarly in schools. We have and know families who are and who are not, quote unquote, showing up to our schools. So we have to design intentional systems so that there can be that level of engagement. And when I think about the involvement versus engagement, I always think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And I feel like sometimes we design engagement strategies for families that are, at the higher levels of self-actualization. And we do have a lot of families that are still at the survival of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And we have to be very understanding, empathetic, and intentional of creating those systems so that we can involve them and engage them of wherever they're at, and also make a shift in our practice of what that actually means.
Love this. All right. So we said let's be intentional. We talked about the actions, strategies. Let's get specific, because let's just say we have an influx of students that are coming in from a different country. And that could mean whatever it looks like. For whatever reason, maybe they're coming in and we're like, okay, now I have an influx of students. So it can't be business as usual. There needs to be something that's intentional. What are some maybe strategies that you would to give to school leaders that may be in similar situation where there's a major change that has taken place, whether if it's student demographics or whatever it might be, to, I don't know, communicate or show those actions that you're talking about before?
Yeah, I mean, and I've given them in a little different sequence about 5 tips I give in my book. But I would say, like, if for this case study that you just presented, you have an influx of students that are not the demographic that you've traditionally worked with. Take time to understand their context, take time to understand their culture, and be very intentional around designing the curriculum, the cultural experiences within the schoolhouse to make them feel welcome, make them feel seen and appreciated. And I can actually give a very clear example. Although I was born in Austin, Texas, my parents are from Mexico and Cuba. And as a little girl, we would have these examples in one of our math classes around fractions, and the teacher would talk about apple pie. And now I love apple pie now, but as a kid, I had never had apple pie. Had the teacher given an example of like, let's cut up a piece of flan or tres leches cake, like I would have grounded better in that example. And maybe the teacher could still use the apple pie example, but explain, right, what is an apple pie, so there could be a level playing field. And I, as a student that wasn't assimilated into the culture quite yet, could understand that we were just dividing a dessert.
So I mean, so obviously that's being culturally responsive.
Yeah.
Now, the question then is, because I could hear say, okay, well, I only had two classmates or two students that fit that identity you mentioned. And so they would be able to relate. But then there's going to be 28 other kids that don't know what flan is. So
Right.
is this an opportunity for me to try to teach what flan is so that they can relate it to the content? But then I don't have that background. So I hear a lot of excuses. Folks will tell, well, I don't know anything about flan. And I got kids that won't know. So they may not. So I have 2 kids that don't know what apple pie is, but I have 28 kids that don't know what flan is. And I don't personally know what it is. So what are some of the responses that you could have for a school principal who's dealing with a teacher, for example, that's like pushing back on various aspects of just simply being culture responsive?
Yeah, no, for sure. And it sounds like a math problem in itself, but it's really right, considering your context. And surely it would make for a richer learning experience if there is that variety, that diversity inside of a classroom, so everybody can like share and literally bring and share those treats. But it's unpacking what is being said. So in the vein of being culturally responsive, there's an opportunity to do some level setting, and the level setting is where the power is at. So again, even if the apple pie example is chosen, the teacher can take time to say, if you've never had an apple pie, think about a flan or a tres leches or something else. So level setting is what is super, super powerful when we're being culturally responsive in teaching in the classroom.
School principals, I hope you heard that. Like I said, I get folks that have, but I like how you said, well, if you like this, think about it from that perspective. But if you like this, so now you're being more inclusive with your language.
Right.
And it's just like simple tweaks that we can make in the classroom that will make such a difference.
100%. And and this is true across, much bigger and more complicated conversations, right? Because no one's going to come fighting for us around apple pie.
No, hold on.
Who's making that apple pie? It depends on who's making that apple pie.
Yeah.
I know that DEI right now is like super divisive and it's contentious to word things. But I think when we center it on what does it actually mean and what is it actually intended for, its intentionality is to treat each other with a lot of humanity, dignity, and respect. And when we can anchor in that language, I don't think, let me reframe. I want to believe that there are people in this world who can get behind that, and we can all have that shared language and move forward. Yeah.
Okay, I'm with you. All right. So what is your take on change initiatives? So you mentioned parent engagement. We kind of had a brief conversation on that. We've listened to parents. I'm a school leader. We've done focus groups. We've done forums. We've done surveys. So we collected all this data. So now we're like, okay, here's some areas where we can grow. Parents saying this, maybe access to teachers is tough. Maybe communication as far as when the next events are coming or deadlines or whatever is tough. Maybe it's the books and representation in the classroom. Here are some areas that we have listened to parents. They have mentioned to us what needs to change. We want to make those change. What are some strategies that you have for school leaders who are looking to make some change initiatives?
Oh, that's so good. I feel like there's always such a good opportunity to practice great change management principles when trying to implement change. And great change management principles are embedded with humanity-centered design, meaning that you first ask people, like, what is it that they want, so they can be co-creators with you of what those changes are. And not only do you listen to them, you share back with them, like, this is what I heard. And then collectively you make decisions of like what will be a priority to kind of roll out. Because In a room full of 100, there may be 50 different requests and ideas, and you can't do all 50. But if you take folks along with you in the process and you co-design, co-create, and co-decide, then that's where the power is of actually implementing that change.
So who's involved?
Everyone needs to definitely be involved in this process.
Everyone.
Definitely as much as possible involving students, because they're the main individuals that get impacted by our decisions, involving teachers because they're right next to and working with students day to day. You involve the other support staff, administrators, superintendents, school board members, families, community members. When creating changes, I personally like to look at who is this change going to affect and who should be in the room, and then create an engagement strategy to be very intentional about ensuring that folks are in the room, because those decisions are going to affect them.
Yeah, I love that answer, and I like to create a belonging. So I focus more on the belonging side, and so I say it's very important to create a belonging task force, because you can't like you said you can't get 100 folks in one room. I mean, it's hard to get 5 people in the same bike, right? So you get but if you create like a smaller group of task force that kind of helps lead those charges, because again, school principals will tell me, well, I got a million things to worry about. I just don't have the time to create all these initiatives by myself, and I realize there's change that needs to happen. I say, take some of the burden off of yourself and have a creative belonging task force that will help support the goals of the school based off of the feedback and the data that you've collected from your community. And I think those things are important, but sometimes that gets missed. And I love how you touched on, you have to consider those who are impacted the most from these changes that need to take place. So if you don't have students in as part of your leadership or whatever change initiative strategies, whatever that is, if you don't have parents, guardians that are a part of that, then you might be missing the boat there. So I'm glad you brought all that up.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's so important. It's so important. And when we don't do it, we see the consequences of it. We're like, why is this change taking place? Well, it just doesn't work that way.
Yeah. And the other thing I would add is I like to do okay, what are some things that we can do tomorrow? Like change initiatives that can start, like little stuff. Maybe we need to update our website page, or maybe there's little stuff that we can do, Facebook page, and we need to post a video or whatever. What are some things that we can do short term? Then some medium goals that's going to take maybe a year or two, and then some more the longer term effects, which are 3 to 5 years that needs a little bit more attention, which kind of has me thinking about like my next thought, because when we're thinking about a long term, sometimes change initiatives are as a result of historical, we do this every year type of ceremonies or practices, policies that have been around forever. And I hear this all the time. Oh, well, we've always done it this way. And so the pushback is intense, because now you're asking them to change something that historically has been around for decades, maybe. What are some of the things that a school principal who's going into these situations where there is a long-standing policy, norm, or whatever it might be, and now they're saying we need to change this, but they're getting hella pushback as a result, because this is a historical perspective, or this is something that we've always done?
Oof, that one's a good one. This could be a whole podcast. This could be a whole book.
These are case studies.
Yes, indeed. I mean, listen, tradition is really rich and it's super important. It's super valuable. And so I don't want to discredit that. Like, if a school has been practicing a tradition, like seeking to understand where that started, there's a lot of power in understanding the history of where something started. So that's number one. And then number two, if there's misalignment from the reason that it began to current day, and there's a desire to change the practice, I think it goes back to what I just said about change management, right? You bring people to the table and you have a conversation of, here's a tradition, here's why it started, this is what we learned. A, did we miss anything? And then B, do we want to keep this? And why do we want to keep this? And then if the consensus is why, and there's, valid reasons, and I think being open to continue to keep that tradition. But if everybody starts to question maybe there's an opportunity to explore to change this, then that's where it opens up that dialogue of what exactly needs to be changed for that tradition. So for me, I think another example that comes to mind is like growing up, and even in schools today, when I do and get to work with schools around their family engagement calendar, like oftentimes I see a Cinco de Mayo celebration. And, as someone who is half Mexican and half Cuban, and I always have wondered, what about like the Cuban side of me? When does that get celebrated? And so just being very thoughtful around the celebrations that we have and why we're holding them, because you may actually find that you actually no longer have any Mexican children in your house, in your schoolhouse. That's just a very simple example. Yeah. And a little just to laugh, because everybody's still celebrating Cinco de Mayo like if it's Mexican Independence Day, and it's actually a battle celebration. So yeah. That's an example, fun example, and a recent one. It just happened in May.
Yeah, and Thanksgiving too. I mean, it's people. We could talk about the origins of Thanksgiving. It's something that we tend to celebrate. And I remember working on a Native American, and I was working on a reservation. And I was like, "What do y'all do? Like, what are you planning to do at home? Because I don't want to offend. I don't want to just assume that you're." And so some indigenous folks, they do celebrate or partake, and some don't. And so, but that was the conversations that I had. And I think sometimes we just, and I've done this. So when I say we, I'm including myself. Sometimes we stereotype and we just assume like, oh, you're Hispanic. You're Mexican. Oh, okay. Well, Cinco de Mayo, and we're going to throw that out to you. Or you're Muslim. Oh, we're going to throw this out to you. And you need to be happy. Why aren't you wearing your hijab? And like these little stuff that we just use stereotypes off of, and just make these assumptions based off of little limited information or what we have seen on news media, whatever, listen to on the radio. I like to have these conversations with folks, especially that are different from me and don't have the same identities as myself, but I want to learn by asking simple questions as opposed to making assumptions. What are your thoughts on, again, I want to do the right thing. I want to support various communities, but I don't want to stereotype or make assumptions. Do you have any strategies for that aspect?
Yeah, I mean, I think you just grounded it in the example that you gave about the Native American community. There's so much power in having a conversation and seeking to learn and to understand. And I think for school leaders, right, that are at the helm of creating a school culture, one of the best things that they can model is understanding who the educators are in their schoolhouse, right, at the helm of classrooms, and then helping model for them how they can understand who the students are inside of their schoolhouse. So that way there can be that really intentional design around making it feel inclusive and making students feel seen and as someone who belongs in that space. But it starts with asking questions and listening. And humble inquiry is a really powerful tool, meaning that it's not like, why do you do it like this way? But, seeking to genuinely understand, like, oh, I genuinely don't know how you celebrate this. And I would love to learn. And there's a lot of power in that for sure. And then I will also say, like, because I'm a nerd, I like it. I like research. But Yuri Brofenbrenner has this model called Yeah, I love it.
I'm familiar. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I got excited. Go ahead.
See, fellow nerd.
Go ahead. I'm listening.
And he talks about human development and talks about like microsystems. Yep. There's 5 systems, and essentially, right, it really informs how a child develops. And if we can understand that everyone has different dynamics that they're born into, different circumstances that they're born in, and then seek to understand what those are, it's just really powerful. And it doesn't happen overnight. There's things that school administrators can do to learn and model and learning from their teachers of who their teachers are coming into the classroom as teaching professionals, but then tools that they can equip their teachers with so that they can create activities so that teachers also know who are the little humans that are inside their classrooms, that they get the opportunity to learn and develop in their journey, because they're just part of that journey.
I got excited when you brought up Brofenbrenner. So I taught a class one summer, was it last night, 2 summers ago, at an education for a university, and that concept of the will and the various models built in, and how we learn and how we grow up, and our circles, and how all that impacts what we do in life. And so I got excited. I actually put it in my book, my upcoming book coming out this year. Okay. So, okay. All right. I got excited. Okay. Here's another question I have, because you've given out some really good strategies as far as how to handle certain situations. Still, at the end of the day, sometimes the amount of stress that we might have when it comes to leadership and standing 10 toes on these concepts and understand, look, this is what's best for the kids or best for our community or for our school. And so you got to stand in it. And I love that you gave tips. Well, what kind of, I don't know, do you suggest joining affinity groups, or how do you keep yourself grounded as a school leader and not burn out yourself from quote unquote putting out all these fires? What are some suggestions that you may have when it comes to self-care, maintaining yourself, and just kind of remaining vigilant in this work?
Yeah. Well, first, I just want to say thank you so much to our school leaders, to our educators for leading this work right now. This is
Mhm.
perhaps one of the most difficult times to
Yeah.
be an educational leader. So I thank you for that. And the burnout is real. We've seen it. We've seen the turnover rate and people just feeling exhausted. And the first thing I would say is, even myself as a self-funded entrepreneur, is like, if I do not take care of myself, there is no way that I can show up and do this work, because I'm pouring from an empty cup. And what I have learned in these last 6 years of leading my organization is that when I pour from a cup that's being poured into, I can abundantly flow. And so for school leaders, taking care of yourself, I even say this in my book around making sure your oxygen mask is on so that you can fully be present and pour into your teachers and to your community is very powerful. And then I would also say that it's incredibly important that you as a school leader take time and space to recognize your position. Like, I get so excited about this. Oh my gosh. Principals, school leaders, you are our community leaders. And in our schools, we have the opportunity to take strangers and bring them into the schoolhouse and build communities. And the opportunity for you to create a school culture where you're intentionally designing systems where people are working with one another and helping each other is just so powerful. So if you are exhausted and it's related to how you're leading your school and because you're trying to do everything, that's where you got to pause, put your oxygen mask on, and then work with your school community, your school culture. That includes your families, your students, board members, and all, so that you can create a different culture inside the schoolhouse.
I tell you what, bringing the fire today. So I appreciate you. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, you're right. We got to take care of ourselves. Put your oxygen. I love to put your oxygen mask on first before you serve others, and that's a really strong message to those. Like I like to keep folks encouraged, because sometimes the work gets tough. It's like, seems like you almost don't even want to turn the news on because you don't know what the next headline is going to be. But then if I'm on Facebook or Instagram, I'm going to see the same headlines, maybe even worse. So it's just, I like to keep folks encouraged. Stay in it. You got this. So thank you for that message.
Yeah, you definitely got this. And for me, I'm going to say this because it's maybe one of the reasons I had to go through it. Like, I was so tired for a long time because I was trying to do it on my own. And the moment that I was like, oh, wait a minute, I'm trying to reimagine family and community engagement. This is not self-work. This is a whole global thing. And I got to find the people who are like, I want to do this too. So similarly, when the school year starts, you are a community leader. You are charged to create a schoolhouse that brings in strangers and creates community. And so that is your mission and task. And that's just so powerful for one to recognize that this work is not done alone. It's done in community.
She got them quotables. Okay, so here's the thing. I will say this, Marcela. I thoroughly learned a lot from you, and I appreciate the conversation. And I know folks that are listening out there have at least picked up at least something out there. So if you're at the gym working out, I know you probably didn't have a chance to write it down. So definitely replay this. Or if you're driving, make sure you replay this episode because there's a lot there. But Marcela, I'd love for you to take us home with any final words of advice you want to provide to our listeners out there.
Yes. My piece of advice is none of us get to pick the circumstances that we are born into, but we all get to choose how we treat one another. And I am just so grateful again for all of our school leaders, all of our educational leaders doing the work. Treat yourself really good and then treat your community just as good. And you'll see that you'll continue to make the impact and difference that you've been working on making.
Sounds good. All right. Well, Marcela, if we got some folks that want to connect with you, what's the best way to reach you online?
I am on all the socials, LinkedIn, Instagram. I have design engagement and then my personal site. So you can find me, Marcela Andres. Just Google me.
Yeah. Gotta move it. Google you. Gotta Google. Okay. Well, Marcela, it has truly been a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time.
Likewise. Thank you so much. Let's definitely stay connected. It was such a joy. It's such a joy being here today. Thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely.